Hi guys, Evan here. Today we're looking at PT21 Game 3. This is a game that can be a little bit tricky. There's a bunch of spots that end up getting left open, which can be confusing. It kind of feels like you don't have much to hang on to. But if we just use some open-ended scenarios, what you might call templates, scenarios that we haven't completed all the way, you're going to have a pretty easy time with this game. And I think it's easy enough to see that that's the right approach because you have this giant block of non-hostile witnesses. So let's take a look at this. First of all, we know it's an ordering game, and we've got the inherent sense of order in our base in these days of the week, Monday through Saturday. So let me get that drawn in. And at first, it kind of looks like with the amount of variables that we have that this is just going to be a basic ordering game. But then they throw in this extra stuff. 2 full consecutive days of the week must be reserved for interviewing hostile witnesses. I don't quite know what to do with that yet. But then I see that all these non-hostile witnesses will be interviewed exactly once for a full morning or afternoon. So that's a pattern I know, a very classic example of an advanced ordering setup where we got to keep track of the morning and the afternoon. And we'll have a row for each. Okay, so I'll be keeping track of my morning interviews up here and my afternoon interviews up here. Now that 2 full consecutive days of the week reserved for hostile witnesses takes more shape. I know what that's going to look like. We're going to have to block off 2 full days somewhere that's just going to go for these non-hostile witnesses. We don't really know what their names are. So I would just mark that as N or something for non-hostile. And you want to draw that visually in a block off to the side at this point in the game. So now I know that this huge block has to go in somewhere, and that's going to take up a lot of space. And then right after that, I want to list my other witnesses, Q, R, U, X, Y, and Z. Right now it looks like it's only 6 witnesses, and then we've got 4 spots filled up with this, so there's going to be 2 blank spots somewhere in this order, is what I'm thinking right now. But then I find out that Q and R get interviewed simultaneously. So it's really like we only have 5 game pieces up here, and I want to represent that somehow. I chose to do it by just mashing those 2 together and putting a circle around it to show that that's just one unit, one piece. They'll be taking up 1 spot down on this board together. Now, the rest of our rules are pretty much straight up sequencing rules, except this first one tells us that X must be interviewed on Thursday morning, and that turns out to be really critical. Gives us something important to hang on to. Now, Q has to be sometime before X, so I'm writing Q, then X. And don't forget, and this is a critical thing in this game, this is actually that QR block right here. Right? So make sure that you have it labeled QR so you know that that X also has to be after the Q too. Next, U must be sometime before R, so that's actually going to go in before this block as well. And lastly, Z must be sometime after X and also after Y. So now we get a nice little chain. And that chain would have looked very different if I didn't remember that Q and R have to go before each other. Because remember, we were told that U sometime before R, and then we were told that X is sometime after Q. We wouldn't have seen to link those up unless we really realized that these 2 are the same thing. They're just that Q and R together that we see right here. So I've linked the rules, that's important. What do I have to do next? Well, I was looking at this game board and I was thinking, this block is huge, right? Anytime you have blocks that are taking up a lot of space, you're looking at the option of possibly doing scenarios. And I wanted to see, it looks like there's only 3 places where you can fit this big N block. Maybe some of those aren't even possible. So if I can build partial scenarios around that, I'm going to be in really, really great shape, very easily knowing what I can do with the remaining spaces. So let's start out by having the ends go right up in this space right here, which is one place for them. You know, we'll block those off for the ends, and then we'll call this scenario 1. I look down at my sequencing chain because it's the only thing I have to help me figure out the order after that. And the only thing really definite I can see is Z has to be after X. an afternoon is later than a morning, so it's fine if we just drop that z down in here. This will be possible. Now we just have to have the other variables somewhere in these early spots. Now for my second scenario, I'm going to try the non-hostile witnesses. I just realized that I was confusing hostile and non-hostile, so these are actually hostile witnesses. So I changed those n's to h's accordingly. For this scenario too, I'm going to put my hostile witnesses down in this spot right here. Got my x here. I got to take this z out. That doesn't belong there. And what can I figure out from my chain? Well, there's only one place you can put the u and the qr here, and that's going to be this spot back here, these two spots. And then we still don't know where the z and the y are. That's all we have to account for. They can move around in these back 5 spots. Now what about our last option? For scenario number 3, I'm going to put my hostile witnesses in these first 4 spots. Let's keep them all blocked off here so it's easier to see visually. And then according to this rule, again, I got to get rid of that z. It's the dangers of copy pasting. So I get my x in there, and now according to this chain rule, I got to get the u here and the qr here. And it looks like maybe I haven't done a whole ton of work, right? There's still all these open spaces, but there's not too many variables that are going into that, right? If you want to, you can kind of write it down by the scenario, what's left to handle. Here we need to figure out where u, q, r, and then y are going. And here we need to figure out where y and z are going. And here also we just need to figure out where y and z are going. Pretty easy stuff. That should be easy enough to work with. So now I'm feeling ready to move on to the questions. Question 12 is basically an acceptability question, and all we're looking at here is the order. So really all the information you need to solve it comes from this right down here. So just take your chain and check these one at a time to see if they're going to work out. A, we got to cross off because the U is in the wrong position relative to the QR. B is screwed up because we don't have the Q and R together. Got to cross that off. C again has the X, U, Q, R order all messed up. Got to cross that out. And then again, I can see an E quickly. Q with U, that doesn't work at all, right? So we're left with D is the correct answer there. For 13, we're looking for an acceptable order for Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, and Wednesday morning. So there's not much you can do besides just take these one at a time and see if they're going to work out. Clearly, we're up in this order. We're in scenario 1 because you don't see hostile witnesses as an option for any of these questions. So we're only looking at scenario 1 and figuring out if we can do it. A, Q, R, none isn't going to work because that's splitting up Q and R. Got to get rid of that right away. B, R, Y, none, again, where's the Q there? This has to be a complete schedule of the witnesses for those days. So if Q's not in there, you got to cross that out. They're basically checking if you're asleep at the wheel, and that's essentially a test of whether you can read the question stem carefully and see the directions. What about U, none, X? That's not putting this in, which needs to go in between those. So we got to cross that off as well. How about U, Y, and then none? At first I'm like, okay, where's the QR? But then I realize there would be space for it. We have U, then we have a Y here. This is left blank. And then we can get the QR right in here. And everything's all good. We've taken care of all 3 of the variables that we needed to worry about, and everything's all set. That also makes me realize there was another way we could eliminate C. The X is always stuck on Thursday morning. So at any rate, we end up with D as our correct answer. 14 asks us what happens if Y is interviewed sometime after X. So looking at our scenarios here, it's impossible that we're going to be in world number 1, right? There's no place for the Y up in there. And then the question is asking us just a simple thing about the hostile witnesses. What must be a day reserved for interviewing hostile witnesses? Well, if this is out, the common day between these two is Tuesday. Wherever you move that big fat block around, it's going to have to land on Tuesday. And that gives us our answer, B, Tuesday. For 15, we got a new rule that R is interviewed sometime after Y. So just keep track, we've got Y twice in here, but that's fine. These two rules don't contradict each other. This Y can float all the way over to be in front of the QR. So the first thing I'm checking, because I'm kind of noticing the pattern from last question, is does that tell us which scenario we're in? Yes, it does, because it moves the Y up in front of the X, right? These now have a straight line going between them. There's a relationship there. So now I know that Y is out in front of X. That eliminates this scenario number 2. There'd be no room for the Y. That eliminates this scenario number 3. I guess I forgot to label that as number 3. So we got to get rid of scenario number 3 as well. We're stuck up in number 1. And then again, they just ask us about the hostile witnesses. So now we know exactly where they are. They're out on Friday and Saturday. Either Friday or Saturday's gonna be the correct answer. We only see Friday down here. That's our correct answer. So I saved a little time on that problem by kind of having realized this important pattern of let me figure out what scenario we're in before I try to figure out anything else. Very common to do that on scenario games. For 16, we know that on Wednesday afternoon, so right here, and then Monday, so all this right here, there's no interviews. Those are totally left empty. So we know we have to be up in scenario 1. No way to leave it empty in these other 2 scenarios. So what must be true given that? Well, the first thing I'd like is if there's a question about the hostile witnesses. If there were answers about that, that would save me a lot of time. But I do a quick scan and there's not. So how about Q and R being on the same day as U? Do we have to have that? Well, let's just try it here. We put U here, and then Q, R here. And then Y can easily flip into this spot. So we've got an order where it's not the case they're on the same day, and we can cross off A. I'm actually looking to see most of this in my head from here on out. Does R have to be on the same day as Y? No, we just saw that doesn't have to be the case. How about Y before U? Nope, not the case in the order we drew. You can often use work from eliminating one question to eliminate another. How about Y being before Wednesday? Does that have to be true? No, you could just switch these two very easily and it wouldn't violate any rules. So that's got to be gone. And then we're left with E as the right answer. Z is interviewed at some time before Friday. Yeah, that must be true. Friday's all blocked off with hostile witnesses. So in reality, the question was answered simply by knowing what scenario we were in, and then we could have maybe scanned for this answer choice a little faster. So just something to think about there. Now 17 has Z on Saturday morning. So Z right here, Z right here. That means we can't be in this world number 1. Then we just got to figure out what can be true in this situation. How about Wednesday is a day reserved for hostile witnesses? Wednesday, hostile. Yeah, that looks like it's going to work, right? Let's just make sure we can do everything here. We got the UQR, and then Z has to be before X. That's taken care of. And we just drop Y in there somewhere. Anywhere, really. And we're good. So that can be true. Turns out to be a pretty easy last question. This is a game that took a lot of work to set these up and draw it, just because it's time-consuming to write all those rows. But once you had that, it wasn't too hard. I think this is a game you'd be looking to come in around about 8 minutes to solve or so. That's ideal timing for this. Okay, I hope that made sense. If not, ask some questions in the comments and I'll be happy to clear anything up, and we'll see you on the next game.